right, that's enough. No.
We can turn it up a pinch. So do you want to just leave it on?
Yeah, we'll keep it on.
Right. Yeah, because there's a lot of background noise too. Yeah, and if you can't hear him, just ask him to just say, could you please just speak up a little bit? You know what I mean? You should be all right.
Yeah, it did. I want to make sure that it's not going to take some. Go higher. Even if someone is as short as me, they can still.
They're always going to touch it anyways.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening and welcome. Welcome. So thank you for coming out tonight. Most of you know me. I'm Mike Cahill. I'm your mayor. I want to thank BevCam for being here so that other folks can see this, and you may have a chance to rewatch it later if there's anything that you wanted to kind of focus in on. I do want to make sure that I acknowledge my fellow elected officials who are in the room. I'm going to speak briefly, and then if any of the elected officials want to join in and have something to say, and then what we'll do after that is just go right to you folks asking questions or making comments. My main hope and goal with this meeting, while sitting in the room last week, was to be able to go try to do some research, get a better understanding of process, and be able to share that back out. So that's really why I wanted to make sure we get back together fairly quickly. So let me introduce. We have our state representative, Hannah Bowen. Thanks for being here, State Representative. And then I'll just go with who I see. If I miss you, please raise your hand. Ward 5 City Councilor Kathleen Feldman, Ward 4 City Councilor Scott Hausman, Ward 4 School Committee Member Jeff Silva, Ward 2 School Committee Member Ken-Ann Mackenzie DeFranza, City Councilor at Large Brendan Sweeney. I don't want to miss you, but I'm okay. That's who's here. Good. Okay. So again, I tried to do as much research as I can. Met at some length with the couple of the Attorney General's office staff, including the person that oversees this type of transaction, this type of dissolution of the church and disposition of property. Also sat with Jason Etheridge again from Lifebridge, and with Reverend Adam from Second Congregational Church to try to more clearly understand what the connection is and what the projected and desired uses are, right? So let me share what I can. First, on the process, there are two pieces to this. One is that Second Congregational Church files a brief with the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General, by statute, has sole standing, all right, to evaluate a couple of things having to do with the proposed sale, okay? And I'm just going to read those. They have exclusive standing to enforce the due application of funds given or appropriated to public charities and to prevent breaches of trust in the administration of those funds. And in this case, because Second Congregational is proposing to sell to Lifebridge for less than fair market value of the property, then this has a second step. This sale has to go to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, which is the highest court in Massachusetts, for a single justice hearing. This is not unusual, right? It's a process set up in law. And so my understanding on timing is that where things are today, the process will take somewhere between 6 months and a year to run. Most of that time, I'm understanding, at the Attorney General level, is once the filing is put forward to the SJC, they tend to move more quickly. So a number of months is what I'm understanding from today. Second Congregational Church will need to, they've already provided the Attorney General with what they call a BEAD petition for review and assent before filing the petition with the SJC. The petition identifies the transferor and transferee, the church, in the proposal, the church in Lifebridge, includes a reason for the transaction, summarizes the transaction, and identifies any restrictions on the assets. The AG reviews two things: whether the mission of the accepting charity is closely aligned with the mission of the selling charity, and the financial ability of the selling charity to continue operations. And then another note here, consideration is given to both the written mission of the church, here the selling charity, and the historical activity. Once this goes to the SJC really is going to use the same two-step or two-concern process to come to their decision, and that is, again, aligning the missions of the two charities and the financial ability or lack thereof of the selling charity. The AG, let's see. The AG's office said, we asked them, is there an opportunity for others to intervene? I know that was openly asked about at the meeting last week. And what the AG's office said is it would take particularly unique circumstances for the SJC to allow a third party to become involved. Again, the standing really is for the Attorney General under statute and the selling charity. So particularly unique circumstances, there's no absolute right for a third party to file a pleading. It would require the interest third party to file a petition with the SJC. The SJC does not need to allow a filing, and even if they did, it would be in the form of an amicus brief, not as a party to the proceedings. Ultimately, the SJC would still review the transaction for the same two factors, that the missions are closely aligned and the financial ability of the charity. There was one case that the AG's team was able to cite where the SJC did allow a third party to become involved with a brief, and that was in a situation where relatives of the original donors sought to prevent a sale of their assets, So now back just for a minute to what many of us heard last week, and I got a little more clarity on when I talked with Jason Etheridge and the Reverend. I'm looking around the room, and I meant to start with this. I understand that there are people who have come in the room tonight who are very concerned and don't want this to happen. I understand there are people who are here in the room because they very much support the missions of Lifebridge, support the church and what the church is trying to do, support Family Promise, which also has been, been doing some things, operating some of their work out of the church to date. And I know that there are people here who come into this room with concerns and are looking for answers. So I know that if you kind of look along a spectrum of what people are thinking about this proposed sale, I think there are people coming in with very different views. And I want to say that when we get to you coming up and sharing at the microphone, I just want to ask that everybody try to be as constructive and respectful about this all as we all can. So the last thing I want to say is one thing I heard very, very clearly last week from people who are concerned in the neighborhood most proximate, closest to the church, is that there are certain activities they're most concerned with. And interestingly, and I think we all heard this last week, the activities that I think you're most concerned with are activities that Lifebridge and Jason Etheridge said clearly they don't want to run out of this building, right? And so I just want to say that again out loud. A day program for people to kind of drop in and leave, they don't want to do here. A shelter for individuals they don't want to do here. And when I talked with Jason again yesterday, the day before, he reiterated that, look, we run day programs in Lynn and Gloucester. They wouldn't work here, so we don't want to do that here. We run individual shelters. That wouldn't work here, so we don't want to do it here in this building. And he said that last week, and he said it again yesterday. And I know that that's kind of that whole conversation is a key to this. So I just want to have said that again. If this proceeds forward and happens, one thing that I haven't said this out loud to anybody until just right now, but one thing that may make sense for the neighborhood is at that point to have a relationship with Lifebridge and maybe even have a presence on their board. And because I know that they have sites in other communities, and it's a strong board. It's a board of people who are committed to getting good things done for people who are really in need. And it's just a thought looking ahead. All right, enough from me for now. Is there anybody else among our elected officials who wants to have something to say before we start with the community? Sure, Councilor.
Good evening. My name is Scott Hausman. I'm a city councilor for Ward 4. My name is Scott Hausman. I'm city councilor for Ward 4. As this group sort of launches into the discussion and the question and answer about this, I just want to bring to your attention one thing. I read in the Beverly Patch an article written by Scott Souza, and he indicated that the intent of Lifebridge North Shore is to turn the church into a resource and community meals center. So I reached out to Jason Etheridge, and I said I hadn't heard that this was intended to be a community meals center. And he said, about what Scott Souza wrote in the patch. He said, I've never met Scott Souza. I've never been interviewed by Scott Souza. I've never said that we intend to run a community meal center there. And so my point is, for sort of starting this from the beginning, is be careful who you're listening to. Be careful about what the actual facts are. It's very easy for people to sort of, if you will pardon the expression, talk out of their hat about what they think is in fact going to happen at this site. But I would really encourage you to pay attention to verifiable information, factual information, and not let rumor and innuendo sort of control part of the conversation. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Hello, Kathleen Feldman, Ward 5. So the Second Congregational Church is in Ward 5, and the residents around the church are my constituents. And I just wanted I spoke at the meeting last week as well, and I've spoken to a lot of residents that did not speak at that meeting, neighbors right there in the church, right around the church since then. And I just want to say that as much I support affordable housing and I support the work that Lifebridge does, but I just want to say out loud to my constituents and the residents around the church that I am listening to you, and your voice is what I am guided with in terms of my care and attention to the neighborhood and the neighbors there. So I just want to reassure everyone that I am listening to your voices that live in proximity to this church, because one of the things that I heard when I spoke directly to people that didn't feel comfortable speaking last week is that they were disappointed in the fact that a lot of the people that supported this were not direct abutters. And that is a valid concern for them. And I want to make sure that they understand, the residents of Ward 5 understand that I am listening, and that also there are neighbors and abutters that are in support of this. I have talked directly to neighbors that live in close proximity. So your voice is being heard, and I just wanted to reassure the residents directly abutting this area that I am listening and that your voice is the guiding force behind what I am doing in this project and my thoughts on it. So thanks.
Thank you. And I know we're eager to hear from folks, so I'll be brief. Hannah Bowen, your new state representative and outgoing city councilor at large. I think I want to just first say thank you to everyone for showing up last time and showing up tonight, and to folks who are going to watch on BevCam later. I always love to see a full room because it means we're participating. It also can be overwhelming. This room is a little cooler than the church was, but the longer we sit here, it may get warm. So just want to kind of ground the conversation a little bit. Not totally sure what to expect, and in this format, it can be intimidating to get up and come to a microphone in front of a large group of people. Even I struggle with that right now and usually. So I want to encourage people to take that deep breath, really listen to each other as much as we can. I learned a lot at the last meeting. I know I will continue to learn tonight. I know the church and the Lifebridge teams are listening and want to know how a resource like the building that is there and that sort of community asset can be a benefit to us as a community, and want to hear that from us. So I'd encourage people to share those ideas and those concerns. I heard a lot at the last meeting about how deeply everyone who was in that room cares about the safety of their children, cares about the future that their neighbors can have with or without hard times, cares about listening to each other and having a role in community decisions. And so I just also want to sort of offer that before we all get going. I also had a similar conversation as the mayor did with the Attorney General's office. And if anybody wants to go deeper into the weeds, happy to talk through. I brought a couple of copies of some of the guidance that the Attorney General's office has prepared for boards of directors. And it really lays out, if you are a public charity like a church and you cannot continue your operations for whatever reason, like your congregation is closing down and spreading out, what are the steps you need to go through to make sure that what was invested in you as a public charity over many, many years, in this case, centuries, sort of stays in the public interest, and that the people who were donating along the way would be pleased with how it turns out. And so there really is clear guidance on what that process looks like. And while it is wonderful that both the church and Lifebridge want our input on what comes next, they do, as public charities, really just have to stick with what their boards and trustees feel is in the best interest of the public, those who have donated over the years, those who've contributed over the years, as with any other public charity. So I want folks to just keep those things in mind, and please come ask me questions at the end or later. And if you don't feel comfortable speaking tonight, please do reach out. I know, as we heard, some folks have done that already. Please continue to. So that is all.
So here's a microphone. I know it's in front of everybody. Anybody who wants to have something to ask or to share, I'd ask you to come up here, maybe a line here so that it doesn't block people's view of the speaker. Maybe a line of 3 or 4. It doesn't need to be longer. We're not going to leave really until everybody's had a chance to share what they're thinking. At least I'm not. So I don't know who wants to go first, but you're welcome to just, as I said, somebody come to the microphone and a line. If you don't want to wait in a long line, you just wait till it's a few people. Your call. Oh, there you go.
Hello. Amanda Rader, Ward 2. And I was not at the first meeting. We've heard a few comments tonight about what Lifebridge does not intend to do with the facility. I wonder, is there someone here who could speak to what they do plan to do? That might be a good way to frame up the conversation.
So the question was asked if there's somebody who can share some of what Lifebridge is looking to do. Do we have a direct representative from the Lifebridge board or no? Yes. So I can also, I can give you some of what we all heard last week. The first thing we heard was that if they end up taking ownership, the first thing they want to do is keep everybody who's already there. And my understanding is there are NA meetings, there are AA meetings, there are scouts. Family Promise is doing some things in the building already. Looking for affirmation, yes? You're working entirely out of the... Okay, so Family Promise has all of their operations going on at the Second Congregational Church now. The sanctuary would be kept for worship and prayer, and I believe there's some members of the current congregation who would be looking to use that, and then anybody else could. I do know, in talking with Jason Etheridge between meetings, he said, and I didn't know this. This is news, and maybe this kind of thing is reassuring. He said, right now, of the roughly 500 people that we're working with on a regular basis, about 400 of them have housing. And the work they're doing is to help people who may be at risk from becoming unhoused or homeless, to try to keep them in the housing they're in. If they're in more transitional housing, to get them in more stable housing, things like that. I asked them how many beds they have in their shelter system, right? We know that they own and operate River House in Beverly, which used to be a mostly, almost all male shelter, and they had females at the shelter in Salem, and they made the decision to make the Beverly River House completely female shelter. And so the men that were at River House that still needed shelter, I think some started going over to Salem. But they have about 110 beds in their shelter system. And so it was interesting when he said to me that about 4/5 of the people they're working with are currently housed, and they're trying to help them stay that way. They're trying to help them get more secure in where they are. I think we all heard him say at the meeting last week, one of the things they want to do is to provide kind of a one-stop shopping for somebody who needs counseling on different fronts. And I think they're looking to bring other social service agencies into the building at times, maybe for office hours, maybe for some permanent longer-term space. I'm not sure. I was trying to figure that as I listened. But I know those are the things that he has said aloud about what they're already doing, and what's already going on there, and what they'd be looking to do in the near term. I hope that's helpful to the person who asked it. Want to go?
I don't know if I want to get up. Hello? Can you guys hear me? So close. Can you guys hear me? Okay. My name is Janelle. I've literally never stood in front of a microphone in front of this many people before, so I'm shaking a little bit. But I just want to start by saying I'm a mom of 4, and most of my kids all of my kids are in the community. We are at North Beverly, the middle school, and then one at the high school. So I just wanted to start by saying some of my concerns for a mom of kids who are in the surrounding area of Conan Street constantly. I understand that there's people in this room who are for it and against it, and I respect everybody's personal preference. I am for helping. I wish it could be done in more of a downtown area where there's businesses and not a park and residence where our kids hang out after school and are constantly walking. I do know that there is a need for help right now, but I also have a few questions and bullet points that I wanted to go over. I know personally that in the bylaws of this church, it states that the sale of the church has to be done to another house of worship. Not many of you guys know, but there was a house of worship who put in an offer on this building months prior to this happening, and they couldn't come to an agreement because I don't know that part, but I do know they didn't come to an agreement, and the church that is still put the offer in still has another proposal and would like another offer. I know that... What? Okay, sorry, thank you. I know that the church that put the proposal has already stated that they're willing to keep all of the meetings that are housed there, the Boy Scouts, the AA meetings, all the establishments that they have with the community, they're willing to keep following through with. And they also, it's a church in Peabody, and they also have been doing a ton of work with homeless shelters in Peabody, and we do feed homeless once or twice a week. And with the kitchen being in the basement, I felt like, or they feel like too, it would be another opportunity that the church has. Okay, so that's one bulletproof. I just want to see if anybody knows in the bylaws that that's a fact that it has to go to the house of worship. Secondly, I know that they stated that they can't. Can you guys still hear me? I keep going in and out. Okay. I know that when they last spoke last week, they said that they really don't know their intentions of the place because they're waiting to see the needs of Beverly. So how can we know for a fact that this isn't going to turn into something more 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and if it's not going to be what they say it is now, because they couldn't give us a direct answer on all the things that they were trying to do now. They just kept saying it was going to be based on the needs, and the needs may change over the years. So they won't definitely, so we don't definitely know if they're going to turn this into a shelter or not. But my main things are, I'm just here to protect our kids. As a mom of 4, like I said, you know, they're walking up and down these streets, and I know that they have good intentions on what they plan to do with it, but we also don't know what it's going to be, and we're all just looking to protect the community. I know people around the area is worried about their property value of their houses. Like, that's another raised concern for a lot of people. Yeah, so that's all I had to say. I'm still shaking.
Thank you, Janelle. Thank you. Does anybody from the church want to speak now? You can, or later. Yeah? Reverend, so there was a specific question, and I know there's a little more flexibility under the law than that, right? So you, whatever you can share.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Isbitsky. I'm the pastor of the Second Congregational Church. I'm not going to take up a lot of time tonight. I just wanted to address the comment about our bylaws. You can read our bylaws. You can go to our board website right now. It's board.weebly.com. There's nothing in there about the building having to be sold to a church or anything like that. In any case, even if there was something like that, this process that we're going through with the Bede petition and the Attorney General covers those kinds of sales anyway, even if we were to deviate from something that doesn't exist. That's all I wanted to say.
To Janelle's question, if this is helpful to try to understand, I'm trying to go from a couple notes that I took in talking with the AG's folks. The transfer needs to be in furtherance of the church's mission. It doesn't have to be another house of worship, but the charity that would buy it needs to be kind of like in a lot of ways. So in furtherance of their mission, and as I read before, both their written mission and the historical activity of the church. So, and if I understand right, Reverend, that's in your application to the AG, kind of an articulation of all of that, correct? That's part of that process. Okay. Other folks? Oh, sorry.
Hi, I'm Dan Hughes, Ward 5, neighbor of the church. My name is Dan Hughes, Ward 5, neighbor of the church. I have a question, more pointed, specific question. I heard both our Ward 5 counselor speak and our mayor speak. What is your stance? I heard you're listening to us, but you didn't give us your stance. So you've listened to many of us in the community, and you said we're the ones dictating your stance. What is your stance? That's my first question. Second, same question for you. it doesn't sound, from what it sounds like, the AG told us we couldn't do anything about it. It didn't say, I'm asking, what are we going to do? Can we send a letter? Is the city going to stand behind the neighbors of this community? What is your stance on it? That gets back to your stance. Also, if it's just paperwork and it goes through, more specifically, what's the church going to get zoned for going forward? Because there's only 2 tax exempt. It's a church and an education. They're no longer tax exempt, and another 503c. Will they be zoned properly, and will the tax assessment on the property be at real value, not the pennies they're paying to sell it for?
So I believe you asked about taxing. It's a tax exempt property. Right. So there's 501c3s don't have to be churches. I think let's follow up. I don't want to get this wrong. Yeah. So, well, I mean, I understand the Dover Amendment, and you have to be a religious or an educational charity to benefit from the Dover Amendment, which is essentially you're exempt from zoning. But generally, 501c3s are tax exempt, so properties they own are not taxed by local governments. Amelia, where are you at? Could you make sure that you get his name and number? We'll follow up. I don't want to get it wrong, believe me. And then to your first question, you know, I'm trying to understand this, and my sense is that the best course, my understanding of this process is that there's no role. Under the law, the AG has standing. Under the law, the selling charity has standing. That's my understanding of the sum total, the list of who can be involved in the process legally. I think there's a real opportunity for the neighborhood, and I'm happy to work with you to really dig in with Lifebridge, who do really good work and are looking to do things in the neighborhood that I don't believe are inconsistent with what we've been talking about. You know, they say, Jason, I mean, he's the exec at Lifebridge, that the clients they're working with, one, he doesn't want to set them up to fail. Two, you know, I said to him, I think what some of you have been saying is the site is not near to the services that a lot of people need, and, you know, we've got a lot of services more in the downtown for the population that, you know, that might need a place to be during the day, that might need to access meals and the food pantry and such. So I'm not inclined to try to insert myself where the law doesn't give me standing. I'm inclined to work with you all in the neighborhood to try to make sure that if this sale goes forward and goes through, that Lifebridge does the things that they're talking about doing and doesn't do things that would seem inconsistent with the resource that the building is and with what they're trying to accomplish. And I think it can be made to be consistent with what you folks can be okay with versus what you're most concerned and don't want to see happen. So. That seems to be the best course right now. Yeah. His question was, where do I stand? Yes? Yeah. So. Other folks?
I'm going to say this again. I know there's a lot of loud voices, but I've also had support from some neighbors. I just want to make clear that it is not, when people say, we don't want this, it's not necessarily that easy of a solution. So I want to start with that. And again, like the mayor said, we do not have legal standing. So this is similar to, I would say, National Grid and the pipeline project. And if anyone remembers that, we went through a long process on city council regarding the National Grid, the power project that's been tearing apart the city. I'm telling you, I am supporting you, so there's not a stance that I can say I'm going to. The best thing is to work with Lifebridge to protect the neighbors and the constituents in the area, because we do not have legal standing. So sometimes the best thing we can do in terms of taking a stance is to work with what we have to try and protect the neighborhood. So that is not a stance, but that is my role that I will play in moving forward, is to try and protect the constituents in the neighborhood as best I can with whatever power we have in the city. That's my stance.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. I wrote it down so I won't forget. My name is Wendy Linares, and I'm a Beverly resident, a member of Second Congregational Church, and I'm a chaplain. In these times of turmoil and turbulence in the country presently, many of us have had the feeling of a degree of powerlessness and even anger at the fact that services are being cut, and there will probably more to come, for those who are most vulnerable and for those who need the services most. The proposed situation at Second Church is an example of something good that we can stand behind and support when many things are falling apart. I am grateful for an opportunity to advocate for something that will help those less fortunate than myself. Any one of us here could find ourselves in a situation. Any of our kids could find themselves in the situation, our neighbors, our extended family. Any of us could find ourselves in need of the services that Lifebridge will offer. So I'm asking people to have open hearts and to remind you that the people needing these services are not criminals. They are not violent. They are our brothers and sisters. And even if my faith did not call for me to help others, my humanity would. We need to be led by love and not by fear. I stand behind Second Church and Lifebridge and Family Promise 100%, and I stand with those needing the services that will be offered. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Rachel Hand. I'm the Executive Director of Family Promise. So, like Mayor Cahill said, our offices are located in the basement of Second Congregational Church, and we've been serving families experiencing homelessness in the church for the last 3 years and 10 years prior, when the church operated a family shelter. I actually just wanted to come up here and address the shelter question. I know that shelter is a scary thing, and there are a lot of news stories and things that come out in general when talking about homeless shelters, whether it's families or individuals. You're probably seeing a lot of articles nowadays focusing on the family shelter system in Massachusetts. And what I want to kind of state is, although it's impossible to guarantee anything, I do know from my perspective where we stand as an agency on operating a shelter. And I know from my conversations with Jason that when talking about this building, these are the things that we've discussed. So I want to start by saying Family Promise has operated a shelter for over 10 years. And in 2023, we actually decided to close the shelter. And when this was first being discussed, a lot of the discussion was about whether or not Family Promise wanted to pursue opening a family homeless shelter out of this building. Ultimately, our board and staff decided that that is not what we want to do. And the reason is because the needs right now in Massachusetts are beyond anything that a shelter can fix. As you've probably seen in the news, the family shelter system, it's a state-run system. And prior to 2023, 2022, maybe honestly around 2021, there were on average 3,500 families in the state shelter system on any given night. As the pandemic happened and evictions started rolling out, what happened with the state is there was a ton of pressure to increase the number of beds in the state shelter system. So some of you might know the story already. They increased it to 7,500. Those families that needed that shelter existed even when there were 3,500 beds. They increased it to 7,500 beds. It filled up instantly. And now what the state is doing is decreasing it back to 4,000. So ask yourself, all right, we have the position, we have the experience of running a family homeless shelter, so why have our board and staff decided not to do that? And that's because homeless shelters are a Band-Aid. They're necessary, don't get me wrong. We have families sleeping in their cars, we have families sleeping outside, and the same can be said for individuals. But homeless shelters are a tremendous amount of work. They're really difficult to run. They take a lot of effort to keep them safe. And the way that we see ourselves best fitting into this equation is how do we keep people out of them? How do we keep people in their housing? If they come to us sleeping in their car, our question is how do we keep them out of the shelter system? Because shelters are really difficult for the people that are in them and the people that are running them. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, on both sides. And so when we made the decision to close our shelter, it's because we wanted to focus our resources and time on case management, advocacy, and trying to get people housing. So right now my staff works with caseloads of families that are homeless, that are sleeping in their cars. And it kills us because we literally closed our shelter. But there was no way for us to address the need. There's thousands of families that need shelter. So operating 20 more beds is not going to solve the problem. But what will solve the problem is if we help that family find a subsidy, we help that family find permanent housing. That's the focus. And this goal, at least for Family Promise, and I don't want to speak for Jason, but I know we've talked a lot about the vision for this building, is to create a space where people can come and say, I'm in crisis, here's my need, where do I access these resources? And ideally, they can access most of those immediate resources in this building. You know, they can ask us for housing lists, they can ask us for where to go to get food, where to go to get shelter. But as far as I'm concerned, and from Family Promise's perspective, shelter is not the solution. And a lot of agencies right now, a lot of nonprofits recognize that shelter is not the way forward, even though it is necessary, and in some cases it does require expansion in certain areas. But it's not what's going to end the housing crisis in Massachusetts. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys that perspective because I think it's easy to assume that like our ultimate goal is to open a shelter. But I can tell you that like you could not pay me enough to open a shelter right now. It is way too much work, way too difficult, and it's not solving the underlying issues. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
No.
Yeah, so Family Promise has been involved in this deal since the beginning, but The issue is we're very small. There's like 7 of us on staff. We have a very small budget. So we knew that we didn't have the ability to purchase a building of this size. And so we've been in conversation with the church and with Lifebridge about this whole thing since the beginning. And like I said, in the very, very beginning, there was talk of whether or not Family Promise wanted to open a shelter there. And even at that point, Jason even said, that's the only option I would consider. He didn't want to do individual shelter. This is before this has even become a public thing. So I know from my own conversations with Jason that his intentions were never to open a shelter. But again, it's really difficult to promise anything, right? Like, you can't guarantee anything 20 years from now, but I can tell you that the general landscape of the housing crisis in Massachusetts is that agencies like ours and like Lifebridge do not see shelter as the answer. So I can't speak for Jason, I'm not Jason, but I can say that we've collaborated very closely, and that our stance at Family Promise is that shelter is not what's going to solve the problem in this space.
Hi, everyone. Oh, sorry, that was too loud. My name is Jessica Kane, and I actually live in Salem, but I'm here to speak on behalf of Family Promise because I have been the volunteer coordinator at my church in Salem for over 10 years. Before the pandemic, we would host families at our church for 1 week at a time every quarter of the year, so 4 times a year. So we've hosted at least 20 times. Each time we housed at least 3 to 4 families. I think one time we fit 5 families into the classrooms that we have. And I just wanted to share a story that kind of exemplifies what this lovely woman was speaking about earlier as far as who is susceptible to homelessness. One of the families that was celebrated at a fundraiser we hosted, I believe it was 2017, the mom stood up and spoke about how they were in housing. They had an apartment, she, her husband, who was a mechanic, and their 2 or 3 children, and she was very pregnant, but she was having a difficult pregnancy and had to go into the hospital many times. And each time she would call up her husband to come watch the children or be by her side in the hospital. And finally, on the last time, the husband got a call at work, and the boss said, if you leave, you will be fired. But of course he left to go take care of his children and his family. He was fired from his job. Of course now the mom is on bed rest. The father's without a job. They lose their apartment. And so they came into the family. They were living in their car for a short bit. And they came into the Family Promise program. They worked hard on getting new jobs. The mom became, I believe, a hospital information data person. The dad got a new mechanic position, and they were into housing fairly quickly. All of the families that I worked with in Family Promise in their program agreed to certain like behavioral, when they were living together church to church and moving around every week, they had to agree on certain behavioral, like I will respect the other people, I will do this and that. The system is very well run, very well organized. And these are the hardest working people I have ever met. Another one of the families that was in the program, the mom is now on the school board in Salem. She was on the board of directors for Family Promise, and she's very involved in our city in helping other families to avoid a similar situation. So these are hardworking people, and they deserve our support. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me? No? Can I take it out? Hi, I'm Murphy. I'm a lifelong resident of Beverly. I live on Conant Street, 122 Conant Street. I'm in a unique position tonight because professionally I'm also a social worker. I work with the most vulnerable people in the state. I've worked with Lifebridge and Family Promise successfully throughout my 23-year career working with the state. However, I am a realist, and not having clarity about what actual services are being provided at Lifebridge on Conant Street gives me pause. Because no matter how good the people are who work at Lifebridge, no matter how good the people are who work at Family Promise, and they're excellent people. And so are the people they service. However, no matter, there's gonna be some stuff that comes along with certain services. And my question really is for the mayor and the city councilors, because I don't think the sale of the church that we can prevent that. I think Lifebridge is gonna be there. What I wanna know is, what is the city gonna do when certain situations do arise? I've been here long enough to remember when Riverhouse, when people weren't being serviced in Riverhouse, they set up camps behind Air Ryleside. That's a reality, and I'm not saying it's going to be a shelter. However, I know by human nature, if my lifeline is in North Beverly, I need to stay near my lifeline. And I just want to figure out what the city's going to do to help with those situations, because we've had real world situations in the past where people from Riverhouse have set up because they couldn't follow, some of them couldn't follow the rules. And I've worked with the shelter in Gloucester, I've worked with the shelter in Salem, and I've seen and been witness to some of the fallout that happens in the neighborhood. So I think we need to start directing our questions to the mayor. What are you prepared to do to make the residents and the abutters safe? I know I'll likely get on the board of Lifebridge to voice my opinion, or try, but I need to hear reassurances from our elected officials that they're going to commit resources. I think saying we're going to block the sale is unrealistic, and that we have to start working on what services are they providing, what comes along with that, and what is our city going to do to help keep our neighborhood the way it is. Because we don't have the public transit, we don't have the way for the people to get back to where they're staying. That's it. Thank you for everybody. You can respond, Mike, if you want.
Thank you, Tim. So one of the last things Tim said, I just want to start with, when he said that the building, the site, the address isn't close to public transit, and it isn't, right? And that's one of the things that, as you folks have expressed your concerns last week, prior to last week, since, as I've talked with Jason, everyone's saying the same thing. Jason's saying the same thing too. He doesn't see this address, this site, as being capable of meeting certain needs that the people who are challenged in a lot of ways have. So when he says he doesn't want to run a day program there because he runs day programs and he knows it wouldn't work there, I take him at his word. And yet that's one of the things that we together need to make sure is the case, right? When he says he doesn't want to run an individual shelter there because it's not the right site, he runs individual shelters, he doesn't want to set those clients, that population up to fail. I take him at his word, and yet we're going to need to work together with him. So you said the sale's going to go through. It's a process, but the law is set up in a way that it may well be that that's the course that it goes through, right? And so I'm glad you said you're interested in being on the board, because I think it's important. I think there should be neighborhood presence on Lifebridge's board. And there probably should be an opportunity for kind of, semi-regular or check-ins, conversations, and I would want to be part of that with you. When anybody talks about people who might, set up an encampment, Councilor Hausman, you were here with me. Councilor Hausman's been on the council 2 years longer than I've been mayor. And in my first term, we together, the council and I, and a lot of people worked on it, we passed an ordinance, a camping ordinance. We took great pains to make sure that it was constitutional. And the motivation was, it's a public health and a public safety issue for somebody to be living outdoors. Right? It's not in anyone's best interest. And it really is, as I said, health and safety. And so we have been able to successfully, when somebody does set up an encampment where it's really, unsafe for them to be, we've been able to move them, take that encampment away. Now, the population that struggles, that tends to live outdoors, we've got some, every community does. These individuals, these men and women, they tend to have a lot of problems in working with the shelter system. Most shelters are dry. A lot of people in shelters are working at sobriety. And so generally, I don't want to overgeneralize, but people who are living outdoors often have some mental health issues and have substance use issues. And so they don't succeed in the shelters, and they don't generally want to be in the shelters either. We have some fantastic people in this community. Our police are fantastic with the population who you see outdoors a lot. Brenda Matos and her team from Ellis Square Friends, and a lot of other people in this community really work hard. And sometimes they've been able to break through and connect with somebody who's been long-term unhoused. And they find a person and they connect with them at a moment when they're open and ready and capable of getting help. And they've had some success stories, but that's a hard set of dynamics. And so, Tim, I'm trying to answer directly a couple of your questions. We had somebody bring up that there was an encampment out in the Marine Farm area. I don't know, maybe on Marine Farm property or maybe on Waterboard property. And we were able to break down that encampment once it was brought to the attention of Beverly police, and so that was broken down. The folks, it's really hard. Those folks who are most of the year outdoors, and we keep working. I mentioned our police, particularly our community impact unit, which is generally 3 police officers who fill those special roles. They work with the population daily, and they're always trying to get them to agree to services. And as I said, it's hard, and sometimes it works. I'll probably stop there so we can keep going. I know there are people here waiting.
My name is Briggs Reeder of 658 Cabot Street. I guess one of my questions is there anyone here from Lifebridge who can specifically answer questions? Well, it's a little shocking to me, honestly, that given the amount of interest from all sides of this issue, that Lifebridge has chosen not to be present to address some of the concerns of the community. That's one thing. The other question I have is very specific. Yes or no, is the intention to have beds at the church? And it's not that I am necessarily opposed to that being happening. I would just like to know what form that's going to be in. Is this just nightly beds where everybody is sprung in the morning to entertain themselves during the day? Are they planning on opening beds for, single mothers with kids or unhoused families temporarily? They should be here, in my opinion, answering some of these specific questions directly. I would also like to note, this is actually an issue that is close to me. I've been homeless. I was homeless for 6 months in my 20s. I have struggled with this particular issue, but I would like answers from the people that want to use this building in my neighborhood. That's all.
I just wanted to state when this date and time were set, the church and Lifebridge and Family Promise 2, we found out about it from a Facebook post. The time wasn't set with us, and Jason has a long-standing family commitment that had been set for tonight. So we found out it just, as the 4th of July weekend was being announced. So I'm sorry that he's here. I can't answer questions for Jason because that wouldn't be appropriate, except to reiterate that he said multiple times that there will be no shelter like that in the building.
It's telling me it's on, so now you can hear me. My name is Nancy Ignazi. I live directly diagonal to the church on Cabot Street, 640. I face the park that I hear so much about, all these needles that I've never seen in the park. Apparently I don't use it enough. Mayor, my question is, you spoke with Lifebridge, and if I heard you correctly, you were told there are about 110 beds in Beverly at River House.
Okay, I don't want to get the count wrong. They have 15 beds at River House. They have 110 in their system, and they have their largest shelters in Salem. People who know their operations better, do they have shelter beds in Lynn? They don't in Gloucester, I believe. They just have they have a day program in Gloucester. I'm looking around. Well, they have 15 beds in Beverly at River House, and I think the bulk of their inventory of beds is at their Salem address.
Then why on their website do they tell me they have 120 units of housing at the Beverly YMCA? Why do they tell me they have 5 units of housing in Beverly? Miscommunication. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm hearing they don't want a drop-in center. Definitely not good for a drop-in center, no transportation. Not going to be a shelter. It's not a good facility for a shelter. Then what are they going to use it for? Their mission is to help people with drug addiction, with homelessness, with mental health, with substance abuse. I have concerns about those things. I have seen places, right off the bat, people congregate, come home from work, 15 people are standing outside the church, outside my door, outside Tim's door, outside this gentleman's door on Conan Street. How can Lifebridge actually tell the AG's office, we're going to continue the mission of the Second Congregational Church when we can't tell you what we're going to use the building for? I don't understand how that's a possibility. What are they going to use it for? And to echo Tim, I work in the legal system. I've worked with DCF, I've worked with homelessness, I've worked with substance abuse. I know Lifebridge. I don't know Family Promise, I know Lifebridge. I want to know how much regulation the city can put on Lifebridge on what they are able to do with this building. So now they have a building. Now they're going to continue a mission that they can't tell us what it is. But what's the city going to do to say, part of your mission has to be making sure there aren't people congregating, making sure there aren't substance abusers at 10 at night sitting outside the door. What's the city going to do to help us?
I got you. So one of the things that I asked the city solicitor to do over the last week was to try to help figure out, is there some kind of a legal instrument, a legal document, that if Lifebridge was willing to try to make some commitments kind of layered over, say if this goes through and they're the owners, what would they be willing to commit to beyond what's in the SJC document? And to date, we haven't found a way to do that is enforceable at the end of the day, right? And so that's where you heard me say a few minutes ago, I think what's really most important is to build relationships with Lifebridge and work to try to make sure that what Jason is stating about what they're not interested in doing stays kind of the course. And, the things that they are looking to do, when he said to me the other day that 4/5 of their clients are housed, and they're talking about, one thing he told me that and he said this to you folks last week, anybody who was in the meeting, he said one thing they want is to have their offices there full time, and one thing they want is to try to be able to deliver counseling and other services to help people on their path to either staying housed or getting more stably housed. And so, as I said earlier, right for now, I want to take him at his word on that, and then let's work with him on making sure that the things they're talking about are the things that happen. Tim?
I just have a quick question about the counseling that would be offered, and I don't know this. Substance abuse counseling, MAT treatment is heavily used and needed. MAT treatment, medication-assisted treatment, methadone clinics, Suboxone clinics. Do you need special zoning to have one of those in Beverly? I don't know that question because I'm curious if that's going to be one of the services.
We can get an answer to that. Amelia, did you hear it? Amelia, I know some of you met her last week. Amelia works in my office as a constituent services director. Just give her a wave. So we'll get an answer to that question, both on zoning and on whether they have an intent to do anything like that, right? And as far as Jason Etheridge not being here, everybody who remembers in the room last week, I stood up and said, we're going to meet next Wednesday night. I picked it. I said, it just felt that questions being raised needed some answers. And so I picked a night. I didn't check with anybody else. I apologize. I think that this is a process, and I don't want to speak for Jason, but I think there can be a further meeting with some more questions fleshed out and some more answers coming back if you folks want to do that at some point. And I'd reach out to him and encourage him. I mean, the meeting last week was called by the church and Lifebridge, right? So I'd like to think that if you want him to come back and speak to some more of these, and some of the questions now are digging into more specifics than were asked and discussed the other night. So I will ask him if he, encourage him, and we can do this again at a future date. Okay?
Hello? Oh. Okay. So, my name is Krista Terry. I have been a Beverly homeowner for the last 15 years, but I'm originally from New York City, so I have been around a lot of homelessness. And because I'm from New York City, I am also a walker, which is a little unusual in New England. And so I have walked up and down Beverly. I have walked day and night, and I have seen people pushing shopping carts. I have seen a tent or two. I have seen more than the number of families sleeping in their cars that I would like to see anywhere. So I just wanted to put the reminder out there to everybody who's thinking about the community impact of having a homeless population who is coming for services. Because there is visible homelessness, which we see in movies. There's the disruption of that visible homelessness. And then there is the much larger percentage of invisible homelessness. So for everybody here who thinks, well, I'm near this site and there's not homelessness right now, I guarantee you that there is. There are people who you know or your kids know or your colleagues know who are either homeless right now or who are on the verge of becoming homeless. I can't make any promises either, but the majority of people who a site like this is going to serve are not disruptive. They are not, if people are worried about what your kids might see, they're not dirty, they're not pushing a shopping cart, they don't look like a homeless person from a movie, even though there's nothing wrong with that. They are people who are already in your community that you might even know. So I would urge everybody to examine your thinking about what homeless people look like, what homeless services look like before you make any kind of decision. And also, if you are truly concerned, volunteer, because you will meet actual homeless people, and it will change your perception of what that means, what it looks like, what the impact on a community can be. Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Mulady, and I promised my wife I wasn't going to speak tonight, but she's not here. I just want to apologize. I think there's a lot of frustration for the lack of transparency in this process for residents and people in the neighborhood. And there's this clear fear of the unknown about what's going to happen in the future that we're looking for some sort of answer. And it just seems like that answer may not happen on the timeline that we would like. But it's pretty clear that there is some sort of plan for a safety net. And to piggyback off of what Krista, fellow New Yorker transplant, said, we're talking about a program that's going to assist our neighbors. So we had 366 kids in our kindergarten class in Beverly Public Schools last school year. Of that 366, 113 of them are considered low income. We have 41% of our city residents are cost burden, which means spending 30% of their income on a housing cost. 17% of our residents are severely cost burdened. And 37% of all our households are earning or at below 80% of the median income, which means they would be potentially eligible for housing assistance. In other words, we're talking about helping our neighbors, our friends, the kids that are on your kids' teams. So there's an opportunity that we have to not look at some sort of other coming in, but we're really trying to take care of our own. And I try to emphasize this lesson with my 3 kids, which sometimes I fail. And it's a quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald. Whatever you feel like criticizing anyone, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages you had. The line for some people between homelessness and job security is razor thin, and this program provides help for them. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Lynn Huber. I've been living in Beverly since 1979. I'm also a social worker, and I'm also a pastor. So my concern is, why isn't this church still a church? There are numerous churches in Beverly meeting in schools that can only have services on Sunday. They can't provide anything else. They can't do some of the soup kitchens or the clothes, things that Pilgrim does. They can't hold a midweek Bible study. They can't do a lot of things, right? This was meant to be a church. It's a historic church. I am not against the programs about homelessness, but what I'm hearing from everybody is, they're not going to do this, they're not going to do that, they're not going to do this, they're not going to do that. So my question is, why do they need a church building? Why do they need such a big building? You've got the whole church, you've got the downstairs basement, and you've got maybe 6 classrooms. My daughter went to Christian school at that church. So my question was, like High Rock got the church, the white church on Dane Street, and is now thriving and giving back to the community with health fairs that are free and haircuts that are free, why isn't it being considered for a real church? Sorry, but I did a home church for 5 years in my home, and we serviced Story Ave and the Dearborn Ave, and it is my husband and I's church who puts the flowers on the corner of by the high school. We are also the ones who plant the flowers at the flagpole at Story Ave. We go twice a year and do cleanups. We do planting of flowers in front of their homes if they will let us, twice a year. So I know what you can do out of a small home church. I'm now in a church with about 50 or 60 people, and you saw Anchor balloon to 350 people. So my question is, why wasn't this offered to another church in Beverly?
Is it on? My, any answer?
Take your place in that. We are a congregational church. I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of a congregational church. Many churches operate that way, and that means that the will of God that we believe is what is expressed through our voting, our decisions as a congregation. When the congregation was working on this for a few years, we got eventually to our vote, which was in January, and it was almost unanimous. And so we feel that when a vote like that happens, it's almost a sign of the Holy Spirit's blessing, if you will, that we have all heard each other through the process, and that we trust that this is what God is calling us to do going forward. So, I mean, that is the process that we followed, and we feel very strongly that this is God's next action for this location, for the building that has been our home for 310 years. The vote was, we had, our church clerk is here who maybe can correct me if I get this wrong, but it was 52 votes in favor, 1 vote against, and 1 abstention. No, it was only one option was on the ballot. The discernment process about which options we would move forward with happened in the months leading up to that. There wasn't a church that had expressed interest, yes. So, there's... Okay. All right, so for those who maybe didn't hear on that side, the comment on this side was that really, let's focus our conversation here at the microphone and be talking and listening to each other. There's really nothing I can say about any other options. We are moving ahead with this proposal that is now in the process of review with the Division of Public Charities, and that is the path that is on the table, and there is no other path right now.
Oh. So money over God, I guess. But, Mr. Mayor, my problem is the homeless, they have to come from downtown and everything else. You were saying that you got rid of that encampment? No, you did not. They go in every night. A woman picks them up every day. Oh, by the way, they murdered a man in 2010. They're living in there. Matter of fact, Michael, who nobody scares me except standing here. Sorry, I don't do this stuff. But he was walking over to a white car, getting his little drugs, and running back into the woods. Michael right now is 70 years old. When he got arrested, he was 52, I think. So he's in his 70s. But they're still living in there. And by the way, they were living down right by Wenham Lake, too. So what are they doing to our water system? But this woman who lives on Priscilla Road, she picks them up around 5:45, 6:30 in the morning. She brings them back. She drives them all around different stores because they stolen from Shaw's. They stole from the Dollar Tree near us. You're not going to get rid of them. They keep coming back, and I see more coming back. I don't have anything against the homeless. My granddaughter's friend, a matter of fact, might be losing home on Friday, and I said he can come live with us. No child should be in a shelter, ever. But, no, I just see more and more coming. And Michael and Eric, they're evil. I can show you videos. I will go to your office and show you many videos of them harassing my family, threatening the kids. They're awful. Making friggin' rude sexual things towards my granddaughter and her friend. I just see more coming up. I have nothing against the homeless. I would help them. But, no, you did not get rid of them. They're still in there, and my son can show you. He's actually pointed them out, but they sneak back in. Sit in my home one night and watch them go rolling around, because I had to add 7 cameras to my home. I have 2 monitors just to watch my house. We've been threatened. My son's been threatened. We went to the court, and when you have somebody in the courthouse, they don't look them in the eye because they're evil. They are evil. They're awful. They're awful. And like I said, I don't have a problem with the homeless, but you did not get rid of them, and I see more coming. I really do, and they're not all nice. I don't care what anybody says.
Could you spend a minute with Amelia? I want to follow up with you. Do you mind?
Oh, sure.
Okay, thanks. So when I spoke about the encampment that was brought up at the last meeting, I talked with the gentleman, I don't know if he's here, after the meeting, and I said, let me know, we'll get on it tomorrow. And he said, well, no, your folks broke up that encampment in February. Like I said, we believe that it's not safe to have people living out of doors, public health and public safety reasons. And so if there's an encampment, please tell me about it. Please tell police department about it. And okay, well now you got our ear. Yeah. So I'll just ask. Work with anybody else. Please work directly with me on that. Look, I mean, when people don't have a place to be under a roof, it's hard. We continue to try to encourage and work with and get people to try to get services, and we'll keep doing that. Counselor.
I run back there all the time, so we're very aware that there are 2 to 3 individuals that do keep coming back, and that was part of what I said last week, was this issue of homelessness and encampments already exists in our neighborhood regardless of Lifebridge's presence, and it's been a consistent problem with, at least it went from 2 to now it is 3 people, I was just told last week. So we've been trying to work with getting that removed, but it's tough. They do keep coming back, and I've spoken with a lot of the residents along Cabot Street and definitely acknowledge there is a problem. I live in the neighborhood as well, so I understand. So.
Yeah, please.
Good evening. I'm not a resident in the area. I'm a resident of Beverly, but how about now? Okay, I'm a resident of Beverly, but not a neighbor. And I look at this as, this is, at this point in time, this is a real estate transaction between 2 private entities, a church and a business. Whatever happens to that property has to follow zoning ordinances. So if there needs to be a certificate of occupancy by whoever, if a different use is changing there, it still needs to follow the zoning ordinances, which govern everybody that lives in that area. At that point, if there's going to be a change of use, everybody gets a chance to talk about it then, not before this real estate transaction takes place. So, and that's where the city has the city and the residents have their voice, is in either the zoning board of appeals if a variance is needed, or in the building permit process. So I guess I'm just suggesting that we lower the emotion and stop talking about bad people coming to the neighborhood. There's zoning ordinances and there's processes in place to let development happen or not happen. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Elsie Jacobson. My husband and I have been members of Second Congregational Church for 56 years. And I worked at the church, and I saw when we had 500 members. And in the 1950s, we expanded the building to accommodate all the needs of the North Beverly residents. And over the years, that has dwindled. And the North Beverly residents don't seem to need the church any longer. So we're down to maybe 100 members, and we cannot fully sustain it. But we've been a mission outreach church all these years, and some of you may have come to community suppers there. Some of your children may have received scholarships from the church, but it's time that we cannot continue. And we're so thankful that we have Lifebridge that will continue some of our missions outreach that we've always done. Thank you.
Hi. Oh, nope. Let's see here. How's that? So my name is Lisa. I am a Beverly resident of about 30 years. And a little closer like this? Okay. So my name is Lisa. I've been a Beverly resident of about 30 years. I'm not in that neighborhood. But I'm hearing all of what you're saying, and I hear concerns. And those concerns need to be dealt with. I hear people who are in favor of this. I think everybody cares about what happens. I also know that I'm hearing a lot of fear. I'm hearing, which I'm also hearing in the country these days. And I know from my own experience that fear shuts down the ability to think. One of my concerns is that I haven't, that the fear appears, and I could be wrong, but the fear appears to be blocking information. I'm hearing comments continue through the evening that show me that explanations that have already been given have not been processed. So I hope that as you continue to insist on answers, that you'll consider, what am I missing? What am I not hearing? What do I not understand? What is my fear blocking? And as a part of that, I'd also like to go on to say something about the opportunity that Lifebridge offers. I've heard concerns about children, which is a very common concern in this kind of a situation. Just think about what it would mean to one of our children if they, through volunteering to work at Lifebridge, if they were able to help a family find a home. What would that mean to them? How would that change their lives? And how could it change the neighborhood if you gathered around Lifebridge and you all began to see more and more people finding homes? I think you should continue in good communication. And as I said, continue to seek answers to your questions. But I ask that you be open to the opportunities that are also presented, that this community can become more united and vibrant and exciting by how they help and how they make community, how they hold one another, and the security that that can bring to the members that are already in the community. I know it's not an easy vision to grasp onto, but I hope that you'll let it in a little bit. That would be my hope. Remember that Jesus said, when you do this to the least of these, you do it to me. When you feed me, when you feed somebody who's hungry, you are also feeding me. That is also the work that God gives to the believer in this world. Thank you so much for your time.
Hi, Mike Petkovich. I've lived in Beverly about 30 years when my wife told me we were going to move here. It's been a great community, and it's nice to see the turnout like this. Oh, and it's great to see the turnout like this. I think what we have to look at is, I believe Tim or whoever said, I feel bad for the burden that's going to be put on you. You're going to have to figure out how are they going to compensate anything like law or whatever you need to make sure that we don't have these issues, the extra overtime and so forth into it. Because I do believe it's a state-run thing. It's going to come in. So I think if you can come up with a little more plan of how you would handle it, how you're looking at it, I'm sure you've had experience at it. And the second thing, from a PR point of view, family, have you applied to Cummings Properties? I work there. We've given away a lot of money for charities. I myself, through Cummings, gave away $500,000 to homeless shelters. So I'm not against the homeless shelters. We just don't. The sleeping over makes us nervous. And I'd recommend any of them apply to Cummings. All righty? That's all I got. Good luck.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. My name is Nicole. I live on 50 Conant, which is just a couple of houses down from the church. I just had one question because he mentioned something about a tax-exempt status. With that, if that's something that you have to provide or not provide based on their situation, can you put in stipulations with that tax-exempt status, assuming, obviously, this is going to go through? to avoid some of those concerns and. Okay. Thank you. That's it.
I've got some homework to do because I never was told that a city or town had a choice of taxing a nonprofit or not. So I said earlier I'm going to go check on that. Yeah. Anybody else? Please.
Raja here. At one point, I also was on verge of being homeless. And hello. So, quick question about Lifebridge. So, the transfer of sorry, better here. If the asset is transferred over to Lifebridge, what does that mean for Lifebridge in terms of its own ability to sell it to another party in the future? Are there limitations on what it can do in terms of future transfers and to other nonprofits, which come in various forms?
If you heard the question, it was if this goes through and sometime in the future Lifebridge were to then try to sell it to another party, my understanding is it would need to go through the same process to the Attorney General's office. But you asked it, so we'll go check to be sure. Good question. Anybody else?
I just want to speak on a personal level. I became involved with helping homeless people in the 80s. So we've been dealing with this for a long time. I've been living in Beverly, bought a home 40 years ago downtown. And so I've heard sort of skimmerings about, oh, we don't want North Beverly to be like downtown. Well, let's think about that for a minute. There's a lot of people living down there. My husband and I raised 3 wonderful young men now, and they did all the things that everybody else does. They go down to the store, they go to the library, they and their friends played around the common, did all kinds of things, and got more freedom as they got older. Didn't run into any problems. And yes, there were homeless people. There were people that were in the parks, in the common. But we didn't have any issues. And as I said, this is a personal story. My guys are grown up. They're out. My husband and I walk downtown. We're around all the time. And I help in with First Baptist meal programs on Saturdays. So I come face to face with people. Some are housed, some are not. And I have never had an issue with them. I do know that there have been issues, and I do thank the mayor and the police. There's a community policeman who we have a line to that will help out. But in all these years, in the 40 years, personally, I have not had issues with people. People want to be the same as you and me with houses and other kinds of things. Yes, there are some health issues and things like that. So that's number one. So I think as far as like your kids go, I want to just kind of allay the fears a little bit. The second issue is my house value. Big misnomer. 40 years ago, did I think the house that I bought downtown was going to be in a neighborhood of houses of $1 million worth? No, I never did. And that's what's happening. And that's part of our problem here, is that the houses, the 2-family houses that used to have affordable rents for people are now $1 million houses because they're now condos. So it's all part of the issue. I support the Second Congos changing over to Lifebridge. I support the resources that they want to give there. And I do believe that, in fact, they don't want to run a shelter. I'm hearing it. And I hope that all the folks can work together to have this come out to a reasonable, wonderful solution for everybody.
Everyone got me all right? You hear me? My name's Nicholas Calanto. I live on Old Farm Road. I live about 500 feet away from the church, which obviously a lot closer than Jason does because he couldn't make it here tonight. I know he's got a lot of obligations. He said family obligations that he might have to attend to. So did I. I've now had moved 2 different family obligations around to go to meetings on this. I think I'll answer Janelle's question first because no one here from Lifebridge is. The reason that it's going to Lifebridge is the reason a lot of things happen. It's money, right? We all know that. The money is the motivation. That's why there's no palatable answer that comes from the church as to why. It's going to an organization that has money to spend, thanks to taxpayers, has money to put into the church to increase their capacity so then they can go to the state, ask for more money because they're providing more programs. Just facts. I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong. We all need these programs. That's not a fact. That's not how it works. Jason Eldridge at the last meeting told us that they rely mostly on federal grants, I believe. Well,
Nicholas, if you could, I don't want to get tangled up in things. My understanding is that that's really not the underpinning of this proposed sale, that part of the reason that the church needs to go not just to the Attorney General but to the Supreme Judicial Court for approval is they're selling it for far below market value. I believe, and again, okay, the Reverend did talk about the church's decision-making process. I think the church congregation felt it was more of a mission alignment with Lifebridge that drove their decision. I
have to take your word for it because no one here has stood up and given us, we heard fumbling over words as to why no one else was taken. So I don't know how you can tell me I'm wrong when no one from the church could give a concrete answer and no one from Lifebridge is here to factor that in. So. Yes, they're. Okay. All right.
I think you've got other points you want to make, right?
I do. I was trying to answer a question because nobody here has given concrete answers to these in this first public forum we've had. And I think just to even the sides here, a lot of neighbors' concern is that we found out about this process after they established a committee to transfer the church, after they voted to transfer the church to Lifebridge, and after they submitted to the state, as we were told by Lifebridge's lawyer last week. So obviously they weren't looking for any of our input, and they were hoping this meeting never happened, but I appreciate you putting it together. What I want to reiterate on both sides, it's not about us neighbors saying we're opposed to this facility. It's that we have real concerns, and Lifebridge has not answered a single concern. We had residents last week ask for specifics. What is going to be offered there? How will they be transported? Will people be vetted? And we got absolutely no answers. The only answer we got from Jason was that he could not guarantee it will not be an overnight shelter. So I've heard a lot tonight. A lot of people say this is not a good shelter space. To be very clear, Jason at the last meeting said, I cannot promise you this will not be a shelter space because I may not always lead Lifebridge, so I will not determine its final goals. So please keep that in mind before we spread rhetoric that this won't be a shelter, because no one's put that in writing and no one's agreed to that whatsoever. Now, broader picture here. What I was trying to say about community resources, we're not opposed to this idea. We're getting no information, we're getting late information, and we have no input. This has already been submitted. We still don't know anything about the logistics. we don't know how people will be vetted. We heard from one person tonight who said, these aren't criminals. How do you know that? I'm not saying that everyone's a criminal. I'm not. But you can't get past the facts that if you go to downtown Salem, you see people using drugs in the open. That's a crime. Lifebridge at their housing facility and their thrift shop has at least 5 registered sex offenders to their addresses. That's a concern. We haven't got any promises that those people won't be transported to our neighborhoods near our parks. And I think we need to stop looking at it as we've got a divided side of people who don't want this to happen and people who do want it to happen. The community is looking for some answers and some guidance. And all we've gotten is rhetoric. And last meeting, we heard Jason talk about Lifebridge's #1 priority is safety. So my question tonight is, has Lifebridge met with the mayor and the chief of police, and where does the police department stand on this? Because Jason's answer to any issues we had was, well, if there was an issue in the community, call your resource officer. Well, I believe there's only 2 in Beverly that we heard earlier, and I'm just curious if anyone's actually spoken with our law enforcement chief to see if this plan is palatable and we'll have the resources to handle any issues that do arise.
So to Nicholas's last point, it was a question. So I think as you said, we've heard some things from Lifebridge. You want to hear more specifics. I have not yet sat with the police chief to talk about whether and how, right? Whether and if yes, how any additional resources might be needed to support this effort. When I listened to the specifics of what Jason did put forward last week, if it goes the way he was saying last week, then I don't think we need to dedicate any extra or specific resources to their operation there. We have our community impact unit, which is generally 3 officers, two patrol officers and a sergeant, and we have our regular force as well. So, but you raise it, and it's right to raise it. So, we'll have that conversation. Mm-hmm.
I just want to know for information. I live directly across the street from the church. I didn't know there was a meeting last week. Didn't attend because I didn't know. How can neighbors get information to find out what is or isn't happening? We have Beverly Patch says they're going to be serving meals. You tell me they're not going to be serving meals. How do we find out what good information is? No, that's basically,
No, thanks. Right. I didn't see or read the Patch article. I think it was Councilor Hausman who reached out to Jason and got an answer that they weren't looking to do anything meals-wise. As far as, I think when we wrap tonight, let's agree that this is a process and an ongoing conversation, and I will ask Jason for a follow-up meeting, and some of the questions that were very specific and specifically posed to Lifebridge, we've tried to take those down, and we'll get those to him and try to make sure that he's ready to speak to those. Okay.
Hi, guys. Just real quick, I just want to clarify a couple things because Jason couldn't be here tonight. It's not that he chose to not be here. He could not be here. And a couple of things I've noticed throughout the night is there's been folks who have come up and stated what they believe to be facts about Lifebridge that aren't facts. And, for example, the units in Beverly, the YMCA units, those are YMCA housing units that Lifebridge provides case management for the tenants there. Those aren't shelter beds. The other thing is Lifebridge doesn't take any federal funding. This is all just relevant information because I think what I'm hearing are folks thinking they understand Lifebridge, they understand what's happening. Obviously, this is a very early on in the process, and so we're still learning as we're going, but I encourage you to reach out to Lifebridge directly try not to read about it online. I think at this point we all can agree that there's a lot of misinformation going around online. Sometimes we can misinterpret things when we read them. So Jason is the best source of the information about what sorts of services Lifebridge provides, whether or not there's 14 or 100 shelter beds in Beverly, where their funding comes from, and all of that. So I just wanted to kind of at least shed light to the fact that some of the stuff said here is incorrect.
Thanks, Rachel. And just, yes, there are 15 shelter beds, 15 shelter beds at River House. And ma'am, Marilyn just pointed out to me that I didn't answer your question. No, I'm sorry. So could you please give us your contact information? Anybody who wants to make sure that you get notice of any follow-up meeting, if you give Amelia your contact, at least your email, we'll make sure that when we were putting this meeting out, I think we tried to draw a map around the neighborhood and made a phone call, right? If you didn't get that, it may be because you're not on the city's reverse 911 system, and you may not want to be, but if you do want to be, you can sign up for that. Amelia can help. We also will send an email for any follow-up meeting with everyone we have on a list, okay? Oh, yes.
Hi there, can everyone hear me? Okay, great. My name is Lily. I live in Beverly. I'm a public librarian, and I'm hearing a lot of interesting things tonight about wanting to align whatever goes into this church with the mission of the church. Lifebridge does align with the mission of the church. You talk about spreading Jesus' love. I think you would be pretty okay with this. You talk about wanting to spread kindness, but then you turn around and say that the people who are coming in are evil or are, you don't disagree with them. You want them to get help, but just not near you. And I just would really ask that everybody dig deep down and think to yourself, if you are coming at this as a Christian, if you're not, that's cool, but can you really reconcile those two things in yourself, that you're saying, yes, of course they should get help. Yes, I don't think that they're bad people, but I don't want them near my children. I don't want them in my neighborhood. They're just people. They're just people. I'm a public librarian. I work with a lot of homeless people, and the best thing you can do is treat them like people. Learn their names. Ask them questions. They have childhoods too. They have a favorite color, and they're allergic to dust or they're just like you. They're just people, and they're just trying to get help. You can't ensure that every single person is always going to be acting in good faith. But do you really want to put everyone at a disadvantage over a few bad apples? I'm just really asking you guys to think really, really hard. Do you want your children to learn to be hateful towards people who aren't like them? Or do you want to teach them compassion? There's nothing to be afraid of until there's something to be afraid of. So instead of treating this like an immediate threat, treat it like a bunch of people who are trying to get help and who might teach you something about the world that you haven't learned yet. That's all.
Hello, everybody. Scott Prisbison, 5 Conan Street. First of all, thank you, Mayor, for doing this. This is fantastic. Kathy, loved your answer about the sides, because until you get all the facts and meet everyone, how do you know all the facts? Thank you. So the big thing about all this is everyone's saying safety, safety, safety. Everyone needs help. Agreed. That's what this is all about. Well, my biggest thing about this is the safety. I can go on for a half hour, but this is my main point. That church has 3 sides. You have the park across the street, you have the cemetery in the back, and you have the woods, east or west, whatever it happens to be. Well, it's not safe for the people walking home from Shaw's. The kids are working there, walking by all this. It's getting worse today, over the last 2 years. Like, I sit there on my porch and I see these people, I'm like, oh boy. I mean, I've given people rides home because we're afraid to walk a block and a half down the road. So with that said, the safety is not just for the people that live in this area. It's the people that are going to get help. They sit there, they're in the lot, they're next to the woods. They're in danger too with their children in their car. This is not just about the neighbors. This is safety for everyone involved. So therefore, I don't think that's a good location for what they want to do. And with that said, a good church will do everything they're doing as well. So if you pass the buck on to another church, they will help the homeless, they will help the children, they will have all the activities without putting people at danger. Thank you.
Hi, I really despise public speaking, but I thought I was going to get up here and talk about what it means to be a case manager, because I am in support of this. I know this is like a question. You have to be like, are you in support? I am, but I can share that I have been working as a case manager for 3 years after a career burnout. It is a job that I can describe to you that might help some people who had questions like what's going to happen at this facility. I already work in the building. They're usually there like 3 days a week for 2 hours to 3 hours to 4 hours if the printer's working. I already parked my car there. I've let my kids come and visit the office. What we do for case management, and this, I can't speak for Lifebridge, but prior to joining Family Promise in January, I worked at Beverly Bootstraps for 2 years, and I would say half of my clientele were single adults who had received care sometimes at Lifebridge, sometimes in Beverly. They want to be close to their home where they've grown up. The people that I served when I worked there, they were not people that you looked at and said, that person looks homeless. Looking homeless is also fine, but it's like these ideas that we see in movies about how people look and what we're afraid of, it really is not representative of what really happens when you sit down with people. I wanted to share two of the most salient clients I had before I left to switch to Family Promise. And one was a woman that had been discharged from Beverly Hospital at age 70. She had had a stroke, she had no family, and she was now living in her car at Walmart because she's not allowed to be in a tent downtown Beverly because of the camping rule, and she had no family. A second person that was homeless was a former couple, and the husband had passed away, and they had lived on their Social Security together with their fixed income, and she could not keep the house. And it was foreclosed, and she was living with family and friends, and then again in her car. So a lot of the people that I hear you, I have 2 small children. They go to Beverly Middle School. We also live downtown. I'm not saying this does not going to sound right, but that's already where you're sort of pointing that the homeless people are. I live downtown with many other friends. Our kids run around downtown. They go to the bookstore. They go to the library. Thank you. And they have not had a problem. I'm sure they come in contact with some homeless people sitting by the church that I grew up going to or wherever, but we have not had an issue. So I just want to allay some fears about what it means to live in a city. I found it to be very safe, and I feel like when you're downtown, you have more eyes on people. Just to briefly touch on what we do in case management at Beverly Bootstraps and at Family Promise, and I can't speak for what Lifebridge will be doing, but I'm pretty sure this is like kind of close. So, I have people come in, I invite them for either a telephone call or a meeting. I have to have them text me so I can come out and let them enter into the building. So I'm parking right on the side of the building and entering the same place that I used to go for a bean supper with my grandparents who went to that church, and my dad went to the church and was in the choir. So I let people in, and we walk down the long kind of dark hallway, and we go to our office, and we sit there, and I just listen to what they're struggling with and come up with some goals. Mostly it's a lot of listening. And then honestly, it's a lot of like really boring paperwork that is mind-numbing and bureaucratic and very reflective of if you've ever called National Grid. with a problem, like that is a lot of the work that we're doing. It is signing people up for SNAP. It's helping them fix their mass health because they've received like a letter in a language they don't speak. It's calling people, it's Googling, it is organizing their paperwork because they struggle with executive functioning. I personally struggle with that for myself, but I'm kind of getting better at it with helping other people. So this is just to say it's like a lot of really boring stuff that is already happening both at 35 Conant Street and at 35 Park Street, which is Beverly Bootstraps. Beverly Bootstraps, we had sometimes people come in and cause some issues. We had buttons. People are talking about safety. I got kids, I got worries, I got anxiety, like I know. So we had these buttons that we could press and immediately, like had to be really careful not to accidentally press them. The cops would be there like in a second, and it would be embarrassing if you did it, you didn't need to happen. Luckily that never happened when I was there, but they had, we've had a theft upstairs or something like that. But we really felt safe because of our safety plan, which I think maybe people would be comforted by hearing what that could be. Another thing that comes to mind is like we will need some trash barrels over by the church because humans drive up and you have a coffee cup, things that are very simple to make us feel safer and that the park will be clean. I mean, my parents live in North Beverly, and the scariest thing that happened recently was like the person shooting at a woman who was looking for her cat. I mean, that was really scary because that is something I really am concerned about, which is, gun safety. And that is a neighbor of the church. And it happened within earshot of the church. So I'm available if anyone wants to hear about what it means to be a case manager, what type of work case managers do, or what we've already been doing in the church, or in any of these organizations that are really trying to help people, and think about how much this will actually prevent homelessness. And it will prevent visible homelessness, which is mostly what people are afraid of. Like I haven't heard of anyone being afraid of a family sleeping in their car, because that is brutally sad. But that is what is happening and what we're trying to prevent. And we're trying to prevent elder people from losing their home as as these prices just keep going up and their Social Security checks do not. And that's it. Sorry, it was rambly and I don't like speaking in public, but thank you.
Hi, sorry, I know it's late. I'm Mindy, 20 Odell Avenue. Two things. One is that my background is social work and public health, and I have worked for organizations like Lifebridge, and I'm not going to stand here to try to say anything on behalf of Lifebridge, but for organizations that I've worked with doing similar work in Somerville and Boston, being a good neighbor is a super important part of nonprofit work and social service work. And I know that I've also been a part of meetings and conferences with people that provide services, not that Lifebridge is providing, but very scary sort of public health kind of things that have amazing stories about a lot of community backlash and like legitimate concerns that people are expressing tonight. But also the involvement of neighbors was really transformative, and some of the neighbors who voiced the strongest concerns ended up being the biggest champions of some of these projects because they understood what was happening and felt like they had a voice. And I think one thing I'm hearing a lot tonight is a lot of unanswered questions, and that's really frustrating, especially for abutting neighbors. And so I know that something went around a clipboard, and I think there's a role for elected officials here tonight to translate the questions that are being shared that we don't have answers to come up with some mechanism to keep the public informed. And I guess one other point, I'm sure there are people in this room tonight who have been a recipient of services, who love people that are recipient of services, and some of us will be recipients of services. And I just want to express that we see you. There are people who see you and don't think that just because a person is in need of services that makes them scary or a criminal. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Tim Miller. I'm a neighbor of the church. I live directly across the street. I think a lot of our concerns are with respect to the lack of clarity and the lack of communication that we've received. We were told at the church meeting last week that they informed all the nearby abutters, which is defined to be within 300 feet of the meeting for last week and of the plans for the church. We live 175 yards from that church, directly across the baseball field. You can all come find me anytime you want. And the thing is, like, we weren't informed. There is an effort to keep this under wraps. There's no way they expected as many people at that church meeting last week as they got. There's no way they expected as many as are here tonight. And I just wanted to address a couple of quick things. First, with respect to the patch announcement today, Councilor Hausman, you mentioned that you were assured that there would be no meal services by Jason Etheridge, right? That patch article is not the first place that occurred. That paragraph was lifted verbatim from the Salem News article on the same topic last week. So if he needed to correct it and assure the public that there would be no meal services there, he should have done so before the patch article came out. Furthermore, I'm not really inclined to believe your word for it, considering that last week you regaled us with the tales of Montserrat Art College kids who are living in their cars downtown. Montserrat Art costs 60 grand a year. If they're living in their cars, it's by choice, not by happenstance. The other thing I want to talk about is that you, Ms. Hand, you, first of all, to disparage us as grossly misinformed in your quotes in the patch is not only offensive, but totally inaccurate. We're actually very informed. We've taken the initiative to inform ourselves because none of you are interested in informing us. And I would tell you that you preposterously blamed the growth in homelessness on the pandemic and evictions. There was a 2.5-year moratorium on evictions. Ask anyone who's a landlord how easy it was for them to collect rent or kick someone out of an apartment for not paying. That's absurd to blame it on that. Okay, you keep telling us, and you're here basically as a proxy instead of Lifebridge tonight, and I appreciate all your comments, but like you at the same time as you say that our community is incapable of providing the services that a full-out shelter would need, you're telling us that you provide all those services. Ergo, what would stop you from turning it into a shelter in the future? Plus, you've already observed that it was a shelter in the past. So whatever zoning concerns there are seem to be negotiable. Okay? There is transportation there. There's a bus route that goes directly from Salem Lifebridge to Dodge and Conant Street in front of Shaw's. Okay? It runs all day, every day. There's a lot of overflow for meals at that Salem location. What are they going to do? They're going to bring them to North Beverly. Okay? That's what's going to happen. They're going to use the overflow. They're going to put them on buses. They're going to send them walking down Dodge Street or McKay past 5 different schools and kids walking to school in the morning. Like, that's not acceptable. I'm sorry. Like, it's just not acceptable. Mike, never mind. That's not important. But I want to also say to Pastor Isbitsky, Jason in no way said several times there would never be a shelter there. In fact, the most poignant moment of that first meeting was when he was asked point blank, first question, can you guarantee us there will never be a shelter here? And there was like a 15-second pause before he even attempted to start answering with his non-answer. Okay? There is no assurance whatsoever that won't happen. But quite frankly, the overnight shelter thing is a concern, but the meals thing is just as much of a concern. And I don't believe that won't happen. And what will happen is you'll have people come for meals at 8:30, they'll get their meal, they'll go outside and mill into the community, and then they'll come back for lunch, and then they'll go back out and do drugs in the parking lot or the cemetery or the park or wherever. Like, that's going to happen. As much as we love the one-off success stories, and no one is ever opposed to a church doing churchly things, like, we all want to help the battered woman who's escaping an abusive relationship with her kids in tow and she needs a place to, that's laudable, commendable. None of us are opposed to that. What we want to know is that we are not going to be inundated with the hardcore homeless who don't want services. They just want a meal and a place to do drugs. And if you've never been to Lifebridge Salem and observed it for yourself, I think you ought to go over there. Avail yourself of a lunchtime opportunity to go and watch and see for yourself what's there, because that will be what's coming, and it's every bit as ugly as you think it would be. That's all I got. Actually, I did want to thank you for delivering on the meeting that you promised us last week.
I just want to respond to a couple things. I do believe that you were misinformed on what is going to be happening in this space. But most importantly, I think that people are very misinformed on the faces of homelessness and what that entails. I work with families now, but prior to Family Promise, I worked with individuals experiencing homelessness. I worked with chronically homeless individuals who used drugs and had mental illness. I worked in downtown Phoenix, Arizona. I was 23 the year I did this. And what I want to say is that the image that is being portrayed of folks, I've never felt safer than when I held that job, truly. And I had folks that were willing to take a bullet for me. I had guys that would come and say hi to me after a binge. They'd be drunk for 2 days, and then they'd come back and be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I really missed our conversations. I'm here now." It hurts my soul to hear how people are speaking about folks who have addiction issues, truly, because I wish that everyone took the time to get to know their neighbors and to learn the stories that led to things like drug abuse. And I want to stress, and this is when I say misinformation, the percentage of folks experiencing homelessness who meet that definition of chronically homeless individuals that suffer from severe mental illness or substance use disorder is such a small percentage that shutting down an entire project like this because you're scared of that percent, which is less than 5% in the entire country, to me it just feels ridiculous, because I think what we have to do instead is how can we help the other 95% and then use our skills and our resources and folks like the community impact unit with the city to help resolve any potential issues that may come up. But I can assure you that in my experience working with this particular population, that when things come up that are risky, we know how to handle it. I, as a 22-year-old, was able to de-escalate multiple fights where folks had knives, and I was able to stop them because I learned their names, they respected me, and I wasn't afraid. And I'm saying this because, and I even hesitate to share that example because I think any small example like that becomes like this image of what the whole thing is, and it's not the case, but I wanted to share it because the worst case scenarios folks are talking about aren't what they think they are. And folks like myself and Jason and the staff that I work with, we know how to handle those situations. So I just want to kind of reiterate that the misinformation I'm talking about is when you talk about people experiencing homelessness, you're talking about this tiny percentage that, in my opinion, deserves the same dignity and respect as the children experiencing homelessness, the woman that is fleeing domestic violence who's experiencing homelessness, the 70-year-old woman who is sleeping in her car who's experiencing homelessness. So I just want to kind of, I don't know, at this point I could talk for 20 more minutes about it, but I'm just going to give the mic back to Mike.
I just have one thing to say, and I just speak on behalf of everybody who is against it. You guys are coming at us like we're unkind Christians not showing love. It's not that we're not for a shelter, but we're more for giving a small church the opportunity to show what it can do. I come from a family of alcoholics, drug addicts. I have dealt with different programs. I have brought them there. I have seen my brother-in-law. My sister-in-law is not here anymore. There's caseworkers here. I was a foster mom because my sister-in-law passed away of a drug overdose, and I was left with 4 kids with a 1-year-old child because he was in the foster system. I feel for people who are going through addiction. But what you guys are saying is you're the only ones that can save them with offering all these programs. I have seen 5 of my family members come out of addiction, and the only thing that brought them out of addiction was not a program, it was Jesus. And we need a church that can grow and give the opportunity for these addicts to come and offer services. We're not here to say a church isn't going to offer services to them. And I'm not here to say I don't want them in my community. This is a church building. Let this church building be a building and thrive. If you find another building, I will donate my time because I am there with addicts. But my first love is Jesus. And I will tell you that I truly believe that what addicts and people need is to come and know Jesus. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thanks. So I'm in a butter, quite close, and I'm in the middle. I'm not really, I got strong opinions, but I'm still in the middle. Mostly what I want to say is I think we need help as the neighborhood and the community. We really need the help to learn. I got the church has what they got to do. Lifebridge, that looks like a good fit, and it feels like a lot already happened, and like we're just playing catch up. So a lot of this energy is it's just fear, and I want to learn more. So I'd like to know. Really, there's some details that will be good to follow up on. The differences between the two organizations. One, I believe, is a business. Another is nonprofit. Different requirements to make changes.
When you say the two, you're talking about the church and Lifebridge?
No, Lifebridge and, I apologize, the group
Family Promise?
Family Promise. Thank
So
you.
Lifebridge and Family Promise are both nonprofits, both working to try to keep people housed, get people housed, deal with the insecurity that comes with everything that's involved.
Okay, good.
Both nonprofits.
That's helpful. That's the type of thing that, and I'd also like to understand how this compares to like the Oyster House that's already downtown. The River House, thank you. Sorry, the River House that's already downtown. So, what things?
Let me get you that. I mean, this is good. These are so. River House is one of Lifebridge's sites. Lifebridge has different programs in Lynn and Salem and Gloucester and in Beverly. Lifebridge is a shelter. It's a building, right? They used to use it as a shelter for men mostly. Now it's women only, and it's 15 beds. It used to be more beds when there were men there. It was kind of recast as a 15-bed women's shelter. And just for anybody who doesn't know where it is, it's on River Street behind the Beverly Depot train station. Okay.
So, but how does it get cast? And what were the tools that the city had to have those changes happen? Do you have none? Or are there some in place? The most concrete thing I heard tonight was zoning, which is good, but what are the tools that we can put in place so that as we inch through this process, we can slowly react with some hooks?
Yeah. I think on the zoning question, I know a gentleman stood up earlier, and zoning is relevant in a lot of instances, and I don't know for certain what will come from the AG and the SJC process, but I believe that it may be that when the process is done, if River House is the owner, if Lifebridge is the owner, they may have been designated by then as an educational charity. There are two different types of charities in the state, religious and educational, and those two have extra protections or rights as a charity, and that is that they're exempt from zoning with regards to uses. So I just want to say that may be the outcome when this process is complete. So I would say stay tuned on zoning, right? Before that, you were asking about how to move through this together and try to get the questions answered and try to get, I think the most important thing, if you're willing to do it as neighbors, is to, engage in this conversation with Lifebridge, engage with the help of us, your elected officials, and try to help with Lifebridge shape what they're doing. If it is them who are there come the end of this process, and I keep seeing the expectation, unless something goes sideways with the effort by the church and Lifebridge before the AG and eventually before the Supreme Judicial Court, if it plays the way you would expect, then Lifebridge comes in at some point as owner, and I think along the way, let's take this conversation that has started with last week's and tonight's meetings and keep it going and try to engage it in a positive way with Lifebridge. Does that make sense?
It does, but I don't want to ignore it doesn't sound like we have any hooks the way we started off tonight. Like, this is going to happen. This is one entity. This is the other entity. And it's a little bit just like, tough. Eat it. That's not really good enough. I mean, certainly if everybody who's here tonight just showed up at the church every Sunday, that I guess the church would still be functioning. I mean, but... Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Really help. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay. I guess I more than anything, I want to say thank you for everybody who's made the time to be here, and you know, those who've since left, whatever time people have been able to give. Really and grateful for the conversation, and I want to keep engaged with everybody who's got an interest, a passion, a concern, and if you haven't provided contact information, please do before you leave with Amelia, so we can make sure you get notice of a future meeting. And as I said, I will be talking I'll reach out to Jason Etheridge as a follow-on. We'll try to get him some of the questions, and we'll try to find a time to get back together. Okay. All right. Thanks so much, everybody.